welcome to the midweek update, and as promised we'll cover the coco coir and what went wrong for me and how I'll use it going forward, how I would recommend using it in this type of setup. Obviously there's different types of setup. I'm doing it in my basement, I'm doing it with heat mats, I'm doing it with an indoor light. Obviously if your situation is different, it may be different for you as well. So always take advice from others, watch plenty of videos, that's what I do. There's a lot of good gardening channels out there, a lot of good information. Take the bits of information that work for you. Trial and error always works, and as always just make sure you're watching your plants and see what's going on. So as we can see, again, we've got some with perlite, we've got some without, and we've trimmed down the herd a bit, and I'll discuss that in a few moments. So the first thing I'll cover is the cons of using coco coir from my findings. And the main one is going to be the clumping at the roots. So I'll bring those pictures up like I did the other day, and we will basically see the examples of a clumping at the roots. And that was actually after me cleaning the roots a bit. So if you're seeing that and you think that's clumping a bit, it was actually a bit worse. So along with that, as you can see in those pictures, it dries up very quickly, and we'll see a few examples here. I'm keeping these as wet as I can, spraying them as often as I can. But again, with the heat, with the different size pots, you're going to get different results as well. So that also makes a difference. And speaking of the heat, I had to change the heat schedule. So if you're used to using soil and you're now switching to coco coir or a different growing medium, don't just assume that one size fits all. You will have to change something, maybe a minor tweak, but again, watch your plants and see what's going on, and that's how I found my problem. Still got a few here that aren't really recovering. Hopefully the roots will establish and recover. Most of them are, but you know, a few little ones here and there just need a bit more love and attention. And the other thing, as you can see, a couple of them here have got the greenhouses on. That's just trying to give it the greenhouse effect. So again, when the seedlings were in the little mini greenhouses, it worked perfectly fine. They sprouted up nice and quick. Everything looked nice and healthy. That's because the coco coir was kept nice and wet, and basically that soil could be nice and crumbly, nice and free, and the roots could go. But also the roots weren't that established, so you're not going to get the clumping effect that you do, especially when you get a lot of roots. It's going to suffocate it if it clumps and gets too dry. Now on to the final con, which is mold. You'll see right here I've got some cinnamon, and that helps a little bit. I saw a video on it and I tried it myself. Helps a little bit with any mold that might be growing in the coco coir, and you will get that little mold. You'll get this little white mold, especially if you're using a greenhouse, and it gets even worse if you're using the likes of these bamboo name tags. They love the mold as well, so put that with the coco coir. Didn't have this problem last year with the soil, as I say, but it can get really bad. So sprinkle a little bit here, little bit here. On my leeks out in the garage, I've got a bit of that as well, and it does help, but overall, you know, you need to keep your eye on it, make sure it doesn't get worse, and if it does, maybe get it out and get it into some soil. These guys will be going into soil later on. Hopefully I'll just be able to get the whole thing out and get the roots and put it into the soil outside. So yep, we'll see how everything goes from that aspect. Hopefully we don't get mold carrying over to the soil, but again, first year trying this, let's see what happens and let's fight it as we go. So now on to the pros, and the main one is the very first one, and that's no bugs. I'm not getting any little insects, little flies, not really getting anything. And normally this time last year with the potting soil that I was using around the light, you would see these little flies flying around and you'd see them on the walls and they'd be everywhere. But with coco coir, that's not the case, and it's definitely a big selling point for me, doing it in this way. If I change the way that I'm doing it, if I can get it outside, maybe into the garage, maybe then I'd bring in potting soil, but likely not. Likely I would stick with coco coir. I'm seeing a lot of good benefits for seedlings. again, just need to refine the methods as I go. So go on to the number 2, which is the germination seeming quicker. So germination in this versus soil does seem to be a little bit quicker. It's not amazingly fast. It's not like you put it in and then you get a seedling popping out. No, but it does seem to be a bit better. And then obviously more seeds seem to sprout. So you can see basically how much stuff I've got here. Most of these were successful seeds. I don't recall losing too many. It was in 80 to 90%. Whereas with the soil, it's very finicky. With the peat moss, similar. You may get some seeds that love it, some that don't, but everything seems to love this. The only ones that may be having a problem are the tiny seeds, the delicate seeds, which are the ground cherries, but I think that's just a delicate plant as it is, and I've got a lot more learning to do with that one. The other benefit is number 3 here. It's going to be easier to work with. Coco coir, easy to store, easy to work with. You just got to soak it. And I'm watching videos online to try and help me along. And basically people saying, well, it's easier to store, which it definitely is. You may want to rinse it a few times. I didn't. I maybe rinsed it under the tap a little bit and then I soaked it. Nothing too harsh in the coco coir, but again, that can be batch by batch. It can be slightly different. Everything here seems to be liking it. The pH seems to be fine. So yeah, and basically the last one really isn't a benefit of it, but it's a benefit for me is that any issues that are happening with it seem to be easy to fix. I just had to figure out the best way of getting those seedlings to be unclumped, declumped, however you want to say it, from the roots, and then just apply a bit of water to it so it sort of brings it back to life, and then repot it. And as I say, everything from there went amazing for me. Few little losses, but you know, that's the learning process. You're going to lose some, unfortunately. Yeah, I would definitely recommend using coco coir. I would definitely recommend a little bag of perlite. It's less than $10. So coco coir, perlite, get it going. Definitely really good for me. And then last, what I use with everything, whether it's soil or coco coir, for me is I use this musky, basically fish emulsion. So basically fish crap or whatever it is, I'm not 100% sure, but it's really good. For me, it's been the best. It's got a lot of nitrogen. You see the plants shoot up when you give it, and all I do is I put it in a little spray bottle, and I'm just getting a spray bottle right here. Basically, this is it in here. You can see it's a brown color. It does smell. I don't mind the smell, but if you do, it's not for you. And then I just basically spray it onto the plants like I would normal water. Again, I spray my plants. I don't pour the water on. I find it's a lot more effective. You don't drown the plants then. You don't wash away any of the soil or coco coir, whereas you will if you just put it on. So that's the last thing that I would use with my coco coir, with my soil, with anything for my seedlings. That's the last stage, and it does help, again, give those nutrients, because you won't really get any nutrients in the coco coir. That's one downside of it, but it's really not a downside if you can add your own in very simply like this. Okay, so just to recap, we'll just go through the pros and cons, bring it up on the screen just so you can see. So number 1 con, clumping at the roots. Number 2, drying up very quickly. Number 3, you may need to change your configuration on your heat mats and other things, just because soil is slightly different than this. And again, if you get the perlite in, you might get it closer, but it won't be exactly the same. And as well, mold, but that can be controlled. Bringing on the pros, no bugs. Number 1 pro, definitely a big pro for me. Anyone growing indoors, you don't want bugs flying around. Number 2, germination, it's very quick versus soil from my experience, and you get a bigger return. Most of the seeds do seem to sprout. It's easier to work with is number 3, easier to store. So mine's just put away in a little cupboard underneath here. So see this cupboard, got a nice little cupboard under here, and that's where it's stored, nice and easy. And then number 4, any issues that you see in the cons on the left hand side here, they're easy to remediate in my eyes. So to me, they're not really cons if you can remediate them, but it's just something that you need to take into consideration. So thanks very much for tuning into this midweek update. Hopefully I'll speak to you soon.